Her husband's death had come so quickly. She felt abandoned and alone in ways she could barely fathom. She felt the water trickle through her fingers. She thought about the story that she had heard in Sunday school just the week before, the very familiar story of Jesus meeting the woman at the well and his offer of living water. And she thought as she stood at that sink full of dishes, I could use all the living water Jesus could spare. I never knew my soul could feel so dry. The one thing that had seemed to get her through her day was her Sunday school class. She had only started attending church just a few months before he became sick. She had been amazed at how quickly the church had rallied around her, a newcomer. She had received more than she could ever repay. Because of her church family, she felt connected. She felt loved even in the midst of heartbreaking grief. Deciding to go to church was the best decision she ever made. Often she thought, where would I be right now if I didn't have him? Been a long day for Tom. His day had begun as the sun was rising. He labored as hard as those he managed. However, his day didn't end when the work at the shop came to an end. He instead headed home quickly, washed up, grabbed a quick bite, and then reread a bit of scripture and had a quiet word of prayer. One by one, folks began to show up at his house, and soon his house was filled with the laughter of about half a dozen or so friends, filling the space with chatter of the day's events. This small group of men had spent the whole day working, but they had committed that once a week they were going to come together and just connect and offer a word of prayer for each other. And so that's what they did. They came together and talked about their joys and their sorrows and their temptations and their trials. And they talked about the times where they felt God so present that week. And they talked about those times where God felt so absent as well. One of them read a brief word of scripture. They shared their thoughts on what the Lord had laid on their hearts. Finally, they just sat there and prayed for one another. Nothing really fancy, just a really honest, sincere hope that God would be with them that week. And as the small group left Tom's house, he felt grateful beyond compare for his life, for his faith, for his friends. He felt renewed and strengthened even though he had worked hard all day. By his work in the shop, he made a living. By this care of souls that took place in his living room, he was making life.